There, but we realized it was she had back.
Thank you. Yeah, she's, as I hate to say, Rhonda was like, she's very sensitive. Very,
Well, I'm about 10 minutes extensive being recorded.
the school. She said she came up to me and asked her some stuff. She's gonna, but she just called me. I don't think she's even gonna be able to do this.
Hopefully she's not doing it. She'll be out all next week.
She can't afford it, poor thing.
What?
She can't afford it, like money.
She would actually do it.
Mhm.
That one.
Good morning, everyone. We'll give people about 1 more minute to join. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tamara Stewart, and me and my team and some of the director staff here at Mississippi Home Corporation will be presenting to you the content for today. But before we start, I do want to tell people, please mute your mic. I don't want to have to go and mute all because we do have some presenters in the audience. So please, if you haven't checked it, go and make sure that your mic is muted because we will be able to hear you and we don't want to disrupt people as they talk. Also, we have Vicky Palfrey here who will be taking questions through the chat. You can go ahead and message her directly if you have a question. And Vicky, if you don't mind, continue to admit people as we start on our presentations. We want to start on time so we can end on time. We have a lot of content we're trying to cover to let y'all out by 12:30. I would go and attempt to record this session. Miss Lisa, do you mind welcoming everyone?
Sure. Can y'all hear me okay?
It's a little low, Lisa.
Okay, can y'all hear me good? Is it still low?
It's better.
Okay,
We
great.
can hear you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to
Good
take a
morning.
minute to say welcome to our implementation program. For those of you who have been with us before, you already know the drill. This is old news to you, but you can always learn something new. And for those of you who are new, because I understand we do have some new agencies joining us, I want to say welcome aboard. If you haven't done this before, you're in for a treat. You'll learn quickly that the application part was the easy part of this whole process. Now you got to learn the rules, the regulations that are tied to these funds. So the good news is we have a great team that's here today that's willing to show you the ropes, let you know everything you need to know. They're always available to answer your questions, even beyond this meeting. So I encourage you all to take full advantage of their knowledge. I'm only going to be here for a short while. I'm going to have to jump off to attend something else. But I believe my contact information is probably part of the PowerPoint presentation. Feel free to contact me anytime you need something, especially for those of you who are new. Even if you just want to get a hold of me just to introduce yourselves, I would love to meet with you and get to know you and put your face to your name. Always here to help. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tamara so she can kick it off. Like she said, there's a lot of information that she has to go through today. We want to make sure we get it all in without holding you on any longer than you have to. So you all sit back, relax, enjoy the training, and hope you all have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. All right. This is our agenda for the day. On my team, today we have Ms. Faye McCall. Ms. Faye, I don't know if your camera's on, if you don't mind waving. And most of y'all are very familiar with Ms. Faye and her face. We also have Vicki Palfrey. As I mentioned, she will be working the chat in regards to questions. Vicki, if your camera is not on, please turn it on and wave so people can see your face. I'm not sure if everyone had an opportunity to meet Vicki face to face, but Vicki works with the ESG program. Okay, so we did our welcome. I will give you a brief overview of the Firm to Further Fair Housing requirements. Then we'll go through admin. We have Gina Nelson to go through that with us. Faye McCall will be going through the requirements of the ESG program, including match and ESG documentation. I will be going through the HOPWA program requirements, including documentation. Then we'll bring it back to Ms. Faye, who will go through the request for cash process. We do have a new system for requesting request for cash, not a new form, but just a new process. And David Hancock will be joining us from the Executive Division to go over our annual action plan and con plan citizen participation. Finally, I will close it out with some new things, ESG performance measures and HUD program updates. We don't have regulation changes with HUD often, but sometimes they do come out and we have to adjust as needed. Affirmatively furthering fair housing. MHC works to affirmatively further fair housing by taking meaningful actions in addition to combating discrimination that overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities free from barriers that restrict access and opportunities based on protected characteristics. For our new agencies, just a reminder that we cannot deny services for individuals or families who meet the qualification. However, we do have some specific agencies that just serve a certain class, like domestic violence. If that's in your regulations, that's allowable. But you cannot, but just because you don't feel like working with someone for whatever reason it may be, if they qualify for services, you have to render services. Ms. Gina Nelson will get into the admin information and some new stuff here. Gina?
Good morning. Okay, so I've been asked to speak on timesheets and direct versus indirect cost. So so we want to make sure that we always give you the guidance that we're following. We at MHC, the separate programs have their requirements, but the overall umbrella of single audit / uniform guidance is what we first and foremost have to abide by. So we always want to make sure that you understand where some of our requirements are coming from. So first thing we're going to talk about is timesheets and how what the processes need to be for salaries and wages. So as you can see under section 200 430, it is allowable to be reimbursed for our salaries. And there's that one. Okay, you'll go to the next one, please. Okay. To be able to be reimbursed for your compensation, it has to be reasonable services that are being rendered, and those services need to be equal between your grant and your non-grant activities. So it needs to be reasonable in the fact that we can't have someone who's doing the same position, doing the same thing, and you're charging different amounts if they're working on different grants, or you're charging different amounts. Oh, if you're doing this for the company, side of it, we're going to charge this much, but if you're doing it for a grant, we're going to charge this much. That's not allowed. We have to be reasonable, and it has to be a reasonable amount for the service as well. We can't have something that should be, in a certain salary range, but we're paying twice as much for it because, it's grant-based and not just company-based. Also, we have to follow, even though you're under the grant rules, you have to follow any and all labor laws, state laws. There's never going to be a time when our program or uniform guidance says something or trumps anything that is a, DOL rule or a state labor law or anything like that. And then third, which is where we get into our timesheets, is there has to be support provided for these services for us to be able to reimburse you. Okay, next slide. Okay, and this is just talking once again about reasonable. It has to be a reasonable amount. Okay, next. Okay, so we were talking about wages and having to have records. So we have to have records that accurately reflect the work that was performed. This means that there has to be some kind of system of internal controls at your company to allow for us to deem it, accurate, allowable, and properly allocated. Most of you probably have where you're working on multiple grants, or you're working on a grant, but you're also working on something that's for the company. So you're not allocating your time and having to turn that in to a grant agency like ours. You're having to just keep up with it so that you have it and you can pay your people. All these records need to be kept, as the double I says, all these records are official and they need to be kept by your entity. Okay, next slide. Okay. There's going to be an example for the 3 in the fact that you cannot exceed 100% of the compensated activity. So I'm going to show you an example in a couple of slides where if you're choosing to use a hourly rate instead of proportioning someone's time, that you could accidentally be charging more than what you're actually paying out. And so we want to make sure that we sort of point that out, because if you have staff members that are working on multiple jobs, that can sometimes happen just by accident. Also, you have to follow all the normal accounting policies and practices. Whatever group you are, if you're a nonprofit, for-profit, you have accounting regulations. And so you're always going to follow that. There's never going to be a time when something that we're asking you to do or uniform guidance is asking you to do is going to go against the accounting policies. So if you feel that maybe something is doing that, then that's the time to reach out to us and make sure that we're all on the same page. Okay, next slide. Okay, and this just basically says if you're working on more than one project, then you have to specifically document when you are working on which project, which grant. Okay, next. Okay, so this is our timesheet best practices, and Ms. Faye is going to get into more detail on exactly what they need for you to turn in when she speaks. So, but these are going to be what we're expecting to see. So we need time recorded daily. I'll talk about this a little bit more later as well on another point. It's hard to say if you stop on Friday, okay, what have I worked on all week? Whereas if you're doing it as you go, or you're doing it in the afternoon right before you leave, it's much more likely that you're going to keep up with what you're working on, which grant, what you were doing inside that grant, that kind of thing. We need to have the time recorded on a timesheet. Now, this can be a physical timesheet where everyone just writes their information in, or this can be electronic. But we do need a timesheet. And that timesheet needs to be broken out between what projects, what grants you were working on. And if you need, sometimes that means that you're going to need to subdivide. I was working on, ESG, but I was doing this type of activity so that you know where that time needs to be placed. Next. Next slide.
Sorry about that, Gina. My computer just
okay.
went black just now. I don't know what.
Okay. Hold on one second. Okay. Well, in the interest of time, we'll wait for yours to get.
Okay. Can you see the slide moving?
Okay, yes. Okay, so now we're going to talk about changes to timesheets. It's very important that you have a process for timesheets. We realize that employees turn their timesheets into supervisors, and sometimes there may be an error. It's like, oh, well, when we went to this meeting, we were talking about this. That wasn't this project, that was that project. And so we understand there's going to be corrections that need to be made. As you do corrections, though, we need to have that documented. So have the employee correct their timesheet, have them initial it, have the supervisor initial it. If that's happening electronically, then of course, that will, just be part of that process of electronic changes. This next one, record all hours that are worked, whether they're paid or not. That's going to be part of my example in a minute, where if you have a salary employee that normally works 40 hours a week and you hit a busy time, you have an emergency, and they end up working a few hours over, that time needs to be charged. It just doesn't cut off or drop at 40. It needs to be charged, so that means it needs to be prorated out. So, next slide. Okay, so here's an example of that. We have Amy working, and normally she only works 40 hours a week, and she works on 3 grants. So, and just for an easy example, her hourly rate has been determined to be $25 an hour. And so if you just went in and did $25 an hour to each one of the grants, you'd actually end up charging altogether $1,050. However, you only paid salaries and benefits of $1,000. So you're overcharging your grants. And this is something that can, easily happen. And so we want to just, make that obvious that that's why they keep dropping this into the single audit uniform guidance information, is there, like, you can't do that. And so here's just an example where we show where you have to go in and you have to prorate that amount to show that she worked 20 hours on grant A. So instead of charging $500, you actually need to charge the $476.19. So, okay. Okay, so we need to have it needs to be very obvious on the timesheet for each pay period, the hours worked, where it's going. The employee needs to certify that. So the employee needs to sign off on it. And for the next bullet point, a supervisor needs to approve it and sign off on it. And unless something happens and someone has to leave the facility, supervisors, managers are not allowed to fill out timesheets for employees. Now we understand that every once in a while something medically may happen, that someone may have an emergency and they need to leave, and so we may need to help them fill that out, check with them, get a payment run through so that, of course, they can get paid and you can get reimbursed. However, that should be a very, very rare occurrence. This is another reason why it is so important for them to fill out timesheets daily, because if someone left like today, Thursday at lunch, something happened and I couldn't come back to the office. If my time has already been entered for Monday through Wednesday, then the only thing my manager is trying to decide is, what did I work on? What did Gina work on this morning? And she may know that from a meeting. She may know that from my calendar, or she may just say, I'm not sure what she worked on. We're going to have to charge that to company time and, move forward. And when she gets back, we hope she gets better and comes on back. Okay, so then next slide. Okay, so Vicki, you can let me know if we have any questions right now about just general questions. Because like I said, Faye's going to get into the nitty-gritty requirements for the programs on timesheets. But do we have any general questions on timesheets?
Not at this time.
Okay. Okay, so next thing we're going to go into is direct cost. Okay, not sure what it's doing. Okay, so it looks a little different than what you're seeing, but that's okay. All right, so they wanted me to speak on indirect cost rates. So to understand what an indirect cost rate is, we have to know what a direct cost is versus what an indirect cost is. So a direct cost is one that you can charge directly to the program. So that's whenever you take an invoice or you take a timesheet and you can say this much goes to grant A, this much goes to grant B, and you can break all of that out. That can be salary and wages, it can be consulting, it can be materials and supplies and equipment that are directly used on that particular grant. Okay, next slide. Okay, what are indirect costs? Indirect costs are those costs that you need to be able to run as a business, but it's either too hard or too time consuming to break that amount out. For some groups, you may take the time and it might be easier for you to directly charge, and so you can't always just say what everything goes into as far as like which bucket. Is this always a direct or is this always an indirect? So if you're charging the grant directly, then it is a direct and it cannot be considered an indirect. But an example of indirect is overhead items that you're not charging. The example is like heat, light, accounting and personnel services.
I think someone is not muted. Please mute your mic or your phone. You're having a lot of feedback.
Okay. The other one's not muted.
Vicki, can you go in and mute that person for me, please?
Okay. So once we figure out what's direct and what's indirect, then it becomes a question of what is this indirect cost rate that I'm hearing about. So if we go to the next slide, the indirect cost.
Vicki, I think you muted all. Gina, I can't hear you anymore. Can you try again?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the question becomes, okay, I know what's direct and indirect now. So what is an indirect rate? An indirect rate is a rate that you fill out with the federal government and you provide them this information. You provide them what is indirect that you're not able to directly bill to your grants. And there's different ways to do it, complicated formulas, but you can go about getting a negotiated indirect rate. However, as you can see, number B, a few years ago, they added us in a de minimis rate. And that was to help out the small operations that didn't have the time and resources to go through this negotiation process because it is annually, every year, and very time consuming. So Go to the next one. Okay, so now we have a 10% de minimis rate, and you can request that automatically and have that charged. I do want to point out, because I think there was some confusion when the de minimis rate first came out. That's why there's that note at the bottom. Your indirect cost rate, when you charge that amount, when you take that 10% and charge it and send it over to us, or any grant agency, that's not going to increase your award. So basically what that does is that means that you get those fees, you get those amounts maybe a little faster. So if you are having a grant and you are using it throughout the year and you're budgeting it throughout the year and you know for sure that you're going to use all your money, you know you have that much need, then the indirect cost rate isn't going to help you get more money or facilitate more needs or anything like that. It still has to be budgeted out and it still comes out of those amounts. So just to let you know, just want to make sure everyone was clear that it doesn't actually get you anything extra or anything more if you are using up your entire budget every year. Okay, next one. Okay, so what are some examples of indirect costs, just to kind of go through them one more time to make sure you're looking out for stuff. Also remember, if you're taking these items and you're actually breaking them out between your grants, then they're no longer indirect. So some of these items are sort of iffy items on, are you actually taking that expense and breaking it out if it's an allowable expense? Okay, so we have accounting and legal expenses, we have administrative salaries, we have office expenses, we have rent, and security, telephone, utilities. Okay, and just to remind y'all, this is for the company. So I know that lots of our people on the line today are paying rent and utilities for your clients. And whenever you're doing a client expense, that is 100% direct. It gets charged in. This is going to be on the company side when you have rent, or you have, heating and gas and lights and stuff like that, that is just really difficult to break out between, your different grants and your company expenses. Okay, so last one. Do we have any questions? And also, I encourage you, if you have any questions about indirect costs, I can answer some high-level ones. But if you have questions, if you want to know how it will help you on your grants, the CPA firm that helps you with your financials, helps you with your single audit if that's required, they can definitely look over your grant agreements and let you know if they feel like it's beneficial for you on a personal level, on a company by company. What grant funds am I getting, and can using the de minimis 10% help me? So do we have any questions?
Thank you, Gina. Before we get into questions, I do want to remind everybody that most of the service that we do is they are direct. And we've already been, dividing staff time, office spaces to the direct activities. Now, if for some reason, if you cannot divide, then indirect makes sense. But if you already have a process in place where you know how to separate your activities, your overhead, and your admin time, and it's connected to a specific activity, then continue to charge that to that specific activity.
Correct. Direct is always going to be more helpful than using an indirect rate. If you know that this expense can be broken out between your different grants and your different activities, then obviously having direct reimbursement for your company is the better way to go.
Vicki, any questions came through?
No, there's no questions at this time.
Great. Thank you, Gina, for your time and for your expertise.
Thank y'all.
Next, we'll have Faye McCall to talk about the Emergency Solutions Grant Program policies and procedures.
Good morning, everyone. I pray that everyone is having a great morning so far, and I hope by the end of this workshop training, you'll be having a better day. hopefully you won't be confused. I'd like to start out by just making a statement that I thought was pretty profound with the new strategic plan that the new administration has put out. Of course, I kind of deviated from what it said, but it said every American, but I'm saying that every person deserves a safe and reliable place to call home. It's a matter of security, stability, and well-being. It is also a matter of basic dignity. And we are, as individuals, are responsible to assist in that process. So as I talk to you today about the Emergency Solutions Grant, I'd like for you to keep that thought in mind, because part of our goal is also to reduce homelessness in the state of Mississippi. So as a part of this grant, that's what we are being charged to do. Okay, next slide. Of course, the Emergency Solutions Grant provides funding to assist individuals experiencing homelessness, of persons at risk of homelessness. We want to help them quickly gain stability and provide permanent housing. Next slide. Of course, MHC's goal is also to work with our continuum of care, our community agencies, which are you all who's actually providing the direct services. We want to all work together in preventing homelessness in Mississippi. The ESG program provides funding to engage homeless individuals and families living on the street. It provides help to operate those of you who have shelters. It provides essential services to the residents that are in your shelters. And of course, it provides funding to rapidly rehouse individuals and families. And it's also to help prevent families and individuals from becoming homeless. As a part of this workshop, we are going to be doing, I guess, kind of going through this kind of quickly. A lot of the information that we'll be presenting today is a part of the rules and regulations, which we have on our website, and it's also a part of our policies and procedures manual, which has a little bit more in-depth information for you. Because we've already gone through the application process, like Lisa said earlier, that was the easy part for some of you. The real work begins now when we actually get to implement the program itself. And part of this process is initially we start out, each of you should be receiving, if you have not already received, your contract and grant agreement. Within that, there are 5 important segments of the contract. Of course, the signature sheet. We have some of you may have special conditions. I'm not sure if we really have any special conditions, but we do have the environmental regulations that are required. We have the general terms and conditions. That's a document that must be signed. And then, of course, the assurances, which is the compliance with assurance is committed by the signature of the executive director of the nonprofit organization. Of course, we also would like to see budgets and how you're planning to allocate your funds and how you're planning on using those funds. The effective date of the award is all of that will be included in your contract. You should see that and make sure when you receive your contract that you check the dates on that. I think tomorrow we'll be addressing something on that a little bit later, but the effective date of your award of budget needs to be approved by MHC. The contract agreement has to be fully executed. That means Scott has to have signed it and your executive director need to have signed it as well. And of course, the effective start of the performance period is part of that, and the environmental review has to be completed. I'm sure most of you have already been in contact with Ms. Shirley Thompson on that. So if you haven't completed that, keep working with her and she'll take care of you on that end. On the financial management part, MHC requires a written budget for you all when we do modifications or when we make any changes. The request for changes must be accompanied by an explanation. If you want to make any changes to your allocation, if you started out with a certain amount in one area and you need to, and you see things changing in your program or in your community and you need to move some funds around, make sure you do a budget modification, make sure you do it on a letterhead and make sure your executive director has signed off on it. The other thing is match contributions. It must be made after the date HUD signed the ESG agreement. That has been kind of going further and further into the year. This year, our grant agreement was signed on December 8th. So make sure your match that you're matching this grant with, that the dates are after December 8th, 2022. Okay. Part of the implementation, excuse me, as the subrecipient, you must submit your documentation as necessary to complete the contract special condition clearance. You must submit to MHC a signatory authority. I'm pretty sure all of you all received that request last week. I think it went out. You can have up to 2 authorized signatures on that signatory. I think we've gotten it back from most of you. Of course, you must establish a financial management system that identifies the activity and line item budgets contained in the contract, and the amount of funds approved in the contract budget will be closely monitored to avoid exceeding allocated amounts. Of course, you also must establish record-keeping systems for your project. Next slide. All right, we have a request for cash submission requirements. I will kind of go through our request for cash document a little bit later. But as far as the requirement for submitting it, if you're submitting 1 RFC a month, we are requesting that you submit that monthly by the 15th. If you're submitting 2 RFCs to get reimbursed, try and have one submitted by the 15th and the other one by the 30th of the month. Expenses that are incurred, and this is really talking about our fiscal year, our grant program, and goes, well, our CAPER program goes from July 1 to June 30th. And when we talk about expenses incurred after June 30th of be on a separate RFC. What we're asking you to do is not to submit to us at the end of June. Don't submit to us don't submit to us expenses incurred after June in another month. Try to get it all done by the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. Okay, we're also asking that you all we will make timely payments to your RFCs. However, that means all information have to be submitted, all the supporting documentation has to be, and all the information has to be correct. And of course, once the RFC has been approved, an ACH payment will be made to you. Of course, we have 30 days to do that, and we try to stay within that range, but sometimes that is not always the case. Next slide. Okay, we have some other general compliance that we would like for you all to take a look at in your manual about the procurement requirements, conflict of interest, fair housing and equal opportunity, Fair Housing Amendment Act of 1998, the civil rights regulations and requirements applicable to Mississippi's Emergency Solutions Grant, the HUD Section 3, and audits. All of these are federal requirements that we are all obligated to make sure that we are adhering to. Okay, a little bit more information about the Emergency Solutions Grant. It has 5 program components: street outreach, emergency shelter, homelessness prevention, rapid rehousing, and the homeless management information system, which is HMIS. I'll go through each one, giving you a little bit of information and the eligible activities that you can charge to that particular component. As you will notice, we also have listed the regulation number that you can actually go into the regulation and read a little bit more about it. This is just kind of a short snapshot of what the funds can be used for. Of course, for outreach, it can be used to provide essential services necessary to reach out to unsheltered homeless people. You also want to be able to connect them with emergency shelter or housing or critical services. You also want to be able to provide urgent, non-facility based care to unsheltered homeless people who are unwilling to or unable to access emergency shelters, housing, or an appropriate health facility. Street outreach can be used for case management, engagement, transportation, and emergency health services. The next component is the emergency shelter component. The emergency shelter operations and services funded under this component provides access to emergency shelters and improve shelter quality. ESG funds may be used to provide essential services to homeless individuals and households in the emergency shelter and fund shelter operations. Some of the emergency shelter services that can be provided under the essential services, you have case management, educational services, employment assistance and job training, outpatient health, life skills, mental health, substance abuse, and transportation. Also with the shelter, under the shelter operation is the funds can be used to maintain your shelter. And for those of you who do not have a shelter, you can allocate funds to the emergency shelter component to house people in hotels or motels if you don't have a shelter. Of course, all items purchased must be for the operation of the shelter. Okay, under the homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing, they're similar in what we are providing for them. The funds can be used to prevent an individual or family from moving into an emergency shelter or another place described in paragraph 1 of the homeless definition. Allowable activities for services provided with homeless prevention is in accordance with the housing relocation and stabilization service requirements. Homeless prevention eligibility must meet the criteria under the at risk of homelessness definition. And it has to also meet the but-for assessment and have an annual income of at or below 30% of the area median income for the area. Homelessness prevention provide rental assistance, which is rental assistance and rental arrears, financial assistance, which is the rental application fee, security and utility deposit, utility payments, last month's rent, and moving costs. It also provides services, housing search and placement, housing stability, case management, landlord tenant mediation, tenant legal services, credit repairs. It also provides the rental assistance may be short term, which is up to 3 months, or medium term, which can be up to 24 months. The applicant and the program participant must be the same. A person who is listed as in the household cannot make an application for assistance unless that person is a party to the lease agreement and utility bills. Under rapid rehousing, funds can be used to provide rapid rehousing services and activities in accordance with the housing relocation and stabilization service requirements found in the regulation of 576-105 and the short-term and medium-term rental assistance agreements in 576-106. Housing relocation and stabilization services and activities must be provided as necessary to help homeless individuals and households to quickly move to permanent housing and achieve stability. The funds can be used for rental assistance, financial assistance, services, and rental assistance can be up to 3 months, same as it is with homelessness prevention, or up to 24 months. And the last component is the Homeless Management Information System, which is HMIS. The subrecipient must ensure in accordance with HUD standards of participation that data on all persons served and all activities assisted under the ESG program are entered into the applicable community-wide HMIS or comparable database in the area in which those persons and activities are located. You must report and track all data collection and reporting under a local HMIS. If you are a victim service provider or a legal service provider, you may use a comparable database that collects client level data over time and generate unduplicated aggregate reports based on the data. Information entered into a comparable database must not be entered directly into or provided to an HMIS. The comparable database is only for those agencies that have that's domestic violence or legal. Everybody else that is not considered a domestic violence or a legal agency, then your data should be entered into the HMIS. Okay, as another part of the requirements, when you're, and this is strictly for the participants, one of the things that we are looking for is the but-for, because HUD and the ESG regulation requires to establish eligibility. And initial consultation with a case manager is to be conducted and an assessment made as to whether the household will require emergency shelter or be literally homeless, but for this financial assistance. The case manager, which is one of the most important parts of this program, should be able to make the determination that the household has no other available housing options or lack financial resources that would prevent them from becoming homeless. This includes no family support and no social support network. How am I on my time?
You're doing well.
Okay. Another requirement is conflict of interest. This is also HUD regulated. Basically what it says is that we're not supposed to be providing assistance to family members or ourselves. That is all considered a conflict of interest, especially if you're in a position to make decisions about your program. So make sure you read that, make sure you have a clear understanding of that. If you all need clarification on that, we're open to help you with that. All right. Okay. As a part of this, the coordinated entry / assessment system, each ESG funded program within the continuum of care must use the assessment system. The recipient, that's us, and the subrecipient, that's you, must work with the continuum of care to ensure the screening, assessment, and referral of program participants are consistent with the written standards. For those of you who've been a part of this ESG program for a few years now, you all know that The ESG program requires a dollar for dollar match. We do have an exception for new applicants. If you're very new, the first time you're using the ESG, we have an exception to for you. However, everybody else, you're required to match dollar for dollar. So you must match with equal resources. Matching contributions may be obtained from any source, including any federal source other than the ESG program. Match can be cash or non-cash. Next slide. The different types of match can be cash contribution, expended for allowable costs, non-cash contributions, services provided by volunteers, the value of donated goods and services, the purchased value of any donated building, real property, equipment, goods, and services. Costs paid by program income. There's a little bit more to some of that you may want to check the manual for or the regulations for. That can give you a little bit more insight, and especially into the volunteer, the donated goods and services. Okay. Okay. Required forms for participants. Most of, and this pretty much falls within your rapid rehousing and your homelessness prevention. We have documents that we're looking for when we do a review of your request for cash. If you say that you've assisted this client, then you need to be able to let us know that document that person's homelessness. We have a form that you need to complete, and what each one of these forms, please make sure you complete them in their entirety. Make sure you sign off on it, because that lets us know it's executable. And just read through each one, and this will help you make sure you're getting all the information that's required. That way, when you submit your information to us and we do a sample review and we see something missing, then this will help you have everything in place. Your documentation of homelessness, that will let us know immediately if this person is eligible for the ESG program. We will look through that document. You will have selected what, how they are homeless. So that's one thing that will help you. We have an ESG application that we are looking for information on about that client, if they have income, if they have a lease, things like that. So make sure you go through the application and complete it. And it also has a section in there for your but for or a narrative. A narrative and a but for, it kind of just gives us information about that particular individual. When we do the income verification, we're looking for certain things. There are multiple ways that you can provide that. You can give us copies of check stubs. You can complete employment verification form. You can we definitely want to see the Excel spreadsheet because that's what it'll help you determine if they meet the income level for homelessness prevention. So we are looking for income verification, especially for homelessness prevention. We are looking for the lease. And also, if you don't mind, when you scan your documents in, go back and look at them and make sure that they're legible.
Please.
Sometimes and I understand, scanners are not always doing the best, but just check before you upload it to your HMIS to make sure the documents are readable for us. That can hold up the process. Make sure you have a copy of the rental assistance agreement. This document, make sure that the landlord signs this document, because basically what you're asking that landlord to do is not to increase the rent for as long as the person is in this program. The rent reasonableness checklist, that's a document that we asking you to compare. If you found, the client has found a unit, or if you've assisted the client in finding a unit, compare that unit to other units in the area. We want to make sure we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. We don't want to be housing one individual in a 3-bedroom if there's something available, a 1-bedroom is available for him. So also on that form, it asks you for the fair market rent for that area. So the fair market rent is including the utility and the allowable rent for that unit. So you need to add the rent for that unit plus the utility allowance. That will help you determine if that amount is above the fair market rent for that area. If a client is already housed, we want you to complete an affidavit of arrears. An affidavit of arrears is going to tell us how many months that client is behind, which months they are behind on. So that will, if you saying a client owed $3,000, okay, for what months is this client behind on? So please complete that document and let us know, okay, their rent is behind from September to October. So if you don't mind, if you have any questions about any of these, I'm willing to go through this process with you on a one-on-one basis if you need to. Also, if for homeless prevention, we are going to need an eviction notice. That is one of the requirements for a homelessness prevention plan. If they're already housed, if they've received an eviction notice from their landlord, then of course we're going to need a copy of that. If you have a rental payment ledger, if the landlord can provide you with that, that would be helpful as well for us to see how the client got behind. We also want you to complete your habitability standard. We want to make sure these clients are in a place that's habitable and not inhabitable, but yet we're spending federal dollars on paying their rent. I know some places are questionable, but it needs to be habitable. So make sure you read your documents, make sure you signing off on these documents, not the tenant. We also, for lead-based paint, this is mostly for those who are under 6 years of age, complete that document. And then of course, your termination of assistance document, it should not be completed or signed off on until your client is no longer in your program. We've received documents where you completed that document already, but the client is in the program. So make sure this is something that's as a part of your system. If a client is no longer in your program, or they've gotten to the point where they can take care of themselves, they're stable, they're working, they're paying their own rent, then of course that's when you release them from your program, you terminate and you complete this document. The ESG assistance checklist, that document really helps you to make sure you have all your documents in place. It's kind of a checklist for you. If you go through there and read it and check off on each one of the items in that checklist, that'll help you make sure you got all your documents together for this particular client. So we can go through that. One of the things that you want to keep at hand, we don't need the homelessness definition as a part of the packet when you send in your information or when you upload it to HMIS. We don't need the definitions. We already know what they are. We need you to have those at hand so that you can use them readily, to have them available for yourself. So the definitions are available. So make sure you have them at hand. All right. Of course, the homeless definition category 1 is literally homeless. That means you're living on the street or in a shelter. Homelessness definition 2 category is imminently homeless within 14 days. Then, of course, the homeless definition category 4 is fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. And then the other is the at risk of homelessness as defined by HUD. So make sure you keep those definitions handy so that you can identify the client by one of these definitions. Next slide. Okay, record keeping. All of those documents that I just got through talking about, those are the record keepings for each client. You will have a folder that you would keep all of that information in, because there will be a time when we will come and do a monitoring. So you have to keep physical copies as well as put them in HMIS. So when we come in and do a monitoring, we will be looking to make sure those documents are in order. The documentation order of priority. Okay, it is your responsibility to collect the required documentation to determine eligibility and provide services. Documentation must be collected in order of preference. A third-party verification, if you can get that, that's priority. If not, then the case manager can verify with appropriate forms that this person was homeless or at risk of becoming homeless, or they can self-declare with the appropriate form, but they will have to be the one to sign off on it. As Tamara mentioned earlier, agencies cannot withhold or deny services if third-party documentation is not accessible. So basically, you're not really supposed to deny services anyway, but we understand that there can be some special cases for that. All right. Subrecipients will be responsible for ensuring the following: before financial services are provided, collect eligible documentation to justify financial assistance, that the emergency arrearage payments must be made to the provider, like the landlord or the utility company, on behalf of the individual or the family. You're never to directly pay the tenant for anything. They are not to receive anything. They're just supposed to receive the assistance, but you are to pay directly to the landlord, the utility company, or whoever it is that you need to pay. Proper documentation must be paid to ensure that all costs incurred are eligible. Proper documentation must be maintained that shows how the amount of assistance provided was determined to be necessary and reasonable. That's kind of what Gina mentioned earlier. Everything that we do is federally regulated and must be necessary and reasonable. And proper participant documentation, as I just talked about, and support must be uploaded into HMIS if you're not a domestic violence agency or a legal agency. All right, documentation order of prior with homeless status, at risk of homeless status, rent reasonableness, fair market rent, rental assistance agreement, late fees, lease agreements, habitability standards, environmental review, and coordination of services and systems. Next slide. Okay, this also kind of go into our request for cash. Monthly, we require beneficiary report. That's the number of people that you have served for that month. We can look it up, but it would be good if you all could let us know how many people you've actually served. This is part of the performance, what you're able to show us that you've done monthly. Of course, the CAPA financial, that's part of the request for cash document. We request, well, actually, it's not monthly, it's actually per RFC, the CAPA financial report. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Of course, the HMIS data entry on all ESG participants. So every client that you assist, you should be able to enter them into the HMIS system, whether it's coordinated entry, whether it's shelter, homeless prevention, rapid rehousing. Of course, the IDIS, that is part of our system. It's HUD's financial management system. It's basically how we request your reimbursement. Okay. Thank you. If you all have any questions, I'm available. My number is on their screen if you want to write that down. But I'm available to go through any of this if you need me to. Thank
Hi,
you.
Ms. Fay. Ms. Fay,
Yes, ma'am.
there is a question from Ms. Robinson at Whisker regarding the fair market rent in her area and the challenges that they're having because of the increase in the rent in that area. She wanted to know, would they have exemption for this reason?
I'll take this question, Ms. Fay. And I would like to say yes, but unfortunately, no. We've petitioned for a waiver. The HUD only allowed for a short-term waiver last year for the remaining of those funds. And we petitioned for a waiver. However, the waiver time frame is not connected to this cycle, 2022 funds. However, we can go ahead and petition HUD again, saying that some of the waivers that we had during COVID, we hope that it can still apply because we're still seeing some of the issues. But right now, there's no waiver for FMR for the 2022 funds. There's a few things I do want to point out that Ms. Faye talked about, but for the but-for statement and the requirement, this is mainly for those who are at risk of homelessness, where if they have some type of support network, we do want to make sure those individuals are encouraged to go there first. However, we do recognize that some people may be coming from violent situations, and it might not just be a partner violent situation, it might also be a family violent situation. So we do want to recognize that when we are encouraging people to go back to where they may be leaving, to see if there's any risk of violence there. I'll talk a little bit about the new regulations from HUD when it comes to Violence Against Women Act, which actually supports violence against women and men. I also want to mention that the short-term and medium-term ESG can be used for up to 24 months of rental assistance, but please keep in mind that contracts are only 12 months. So when you're planning to serve clients for longer than the time as you have contract funds for, you need to have a plan B. Just in case something happens where, one, the contract may be delayed, which we tend to see happen frequently. Two, you may not be funded or may not decide to apply for funding. So if your discharge plan for your clients is, well, 24 months, that's not a good discharge plan. You need to consider, like we're in the hospital. The first thing you do when you get into a hospital, the nurse is trying to see when you could get out, whether you're ready or not. However, not discharging them prematurely where they can go back into homelessness. We're going to go into HOPWA, and I'm going to go ahead and present this section of slides. Housing opportunities for persons with HIV/AIDS. The Housing Opportunity for Persons with AIDS program provides housing assistance and supportive services for low-income families and people living with HIV, mainly to help encourage housing stability. The program provides housing and other support services to the most vulnerable population because it wants to improve health outcomes and address health challenges. Truly, and I've seen this in many research, and also I've seen it happen in person, we know that our built environment has a direct impact on our health outcome. Housing is health. If someone has a chronic condition, the best way for them to focus on being healthy is first not focusing on housing. We have to remember in both of our programs, ESG and HOPWA, going back to undergrad, right? We learned about the Maslow hierarchy of needs. You cannot expect someone who's sleeping outside to find income and keep income and stay out of jail or stay off of drugs if they don't even know where they're going to lay their head that night. We have to put ourselves sometimes or think of, if I was in this situation, what resources and tools do I need first before I can work towards some goals? The need for housing for this population. Persons with HIV are significantly more vulnerable to become homeless during their lifetime. HIV prevention, this is more important, and actually we see the benefits of those who are stably housed. It helps reduce risky behavior and transmission. We see it in our HOPWA population, and we see it in our ESG population. And we probably don't want to talk about it, but a lot of people they practice forms of prostitution just to make sure they have a place to stay. And even though we don't want to talk about it, we have to truly consider that. What are we making someone endure because we don't want to provide housing to them? And this is why the programs, especially the HOPWA program, is so important. Reduction of HIV transmission. Stably housed persons demonstrated reduced viral load and resulting in significant reduction in HIV and HIV transmission. It's also cost saving. If you're healthier, you most likely won't be going to the hospital more, and you'll be saving overall costs. Discrimination and stigma. This is very prevalent among the HOPWA population, and sometimes they need an advocate. So those who provide HOPWA services also serve as an advocate for this population. MHC role. Mississippi Home Corporation is responsible for ensuring that grants are administered in accordance with the requirements of applicable law. MHC is further responsible for ensuring that their respective project sponsors carry out activities in compliance with applicable requirements described by HUD. Just like ESG, HUD HOPWA program has a Pacific Rule and Regulation Guidebook, and also we have our HOPWA policy and regulation on our website. Funding is 1 year for agencies to apply and receive funding for HOPWA. Grant extensions are considered on a case-by-case basis. Funds must be used, forgot a word there, before HUD's deadline. Just like with ESG, same thing with HOPWA. If funds are not used on time, we lose it. It don't just go in MHC a later date pocket. HUD comes and take those funds away. We do not want to lose funds in our community. So who or what group of people are eligible for HOPWA benefits? One, of course, you must be living with HIV or AIDS, or be in a household where someone is living with HIV or AIDS. And two, have low income. That's for people with 80% income AMI or less, and or less means from 0 to 80%. This program does not require income for assistance. HOPWA project sponsors, that's you. Any nonprofit organization or government housing agency that receive funds under contract with the grantee is MHC, are considered project sponsors. Please check 24 CFR 574-300. Activities. So we do have a few more flexibilities in HOPWA than there is with ESG. The allowable activities includes short-term rental, mortgage, and utility assistance. We call it STIRMU. Tenant-based rental assistance, we call FIBRA. Facility-based housing assistance, we just call it facility-based. Permanent housing placement, we call PHP. Supportive services, housing information services, and construction rehab under the facility-based housing. STIRMU. The STIRMU payments are for eligible individuals and households and their family members who are already in housing. This is not those who are homeless. These are those who are at risk of losing their housing. The goal is to provide short-term interventions that can help maintain stable housing and a stable housing environment. There is some caps on the STIRMU program. STIRMU assistance may not be provided for costs that occurred over a period of more than 21 weeks in a 52-week period. So no more of, I think it is 5 months within 12 months. That's the cap of STIRMU. And once you reach that cap, you have to wait for another 12 months to apply for assistance again. Let me go back. So as it says inside the acronym, STIRMU can pay for rental arrears, mortgage arrears, or utility arrears. Tenant-based rental assistance, TBRA. The TBRA program, I think I can best compare it to similar to the Section 8 TBRA choice vouchers that comes from the Housing Authority. This is a portable voucher. The primary objectives of TBRA program is to assist eligible applicants to secure safe, decent, and sanitary housing in a private rental market in cities and counties in Mississippi. This program allows individuals and families to choose a neighborhood in which they prefer to live in and helps to upgrade and maintain the quality of the neighborhoods. Now, keep in mind, just like with ESG, HOPWA is subject to fair market rent and rent reasonableness requirements. Each person receiving TBRA must pay a portion of the rent, including utilities. Each HOPWA client must pay the higher of 30% of the family's monthly adjusted income or 10% of the family's monthly gross income. There are some things that can be deducted from the household income, which includes medical bills, daycare, and things like that. That will give you more sort of a net income outside of those bills to determine the cost of the rent. Any questions specifically on the TBRA adjusted costs? One other thing I do want to mention when it comes to TBRA, the TBRA do require a utility allowance calculation, and if applied appropriately, utility portions, depending on the rent and the household income, can be paid directly to the utility company. Facility-based housing, also known as master leasing. The master leasing is a project sponsor directly leases the individual units or block of units or entire structure of from a private owner. So this is where the lease is in the agency's name and not the client. Project sponsor into the occupancy agreement with the landlord, the beneficiary of the HOPWA funds. It provides rental assistance to the HOPWA beneficiaries, including all program administration associated with rental assistance. Having leased units in the agency name is very helpful for clients who may have a bad criminal background or bad credit or something that's blocking them to get or receiving or leasing up secure, appropriate housing. Permanent housing placement, PHP. Permanent housing placement services may be provided in the form of rent and utility deposit for clients who are at risk of becoming homeless or literally homeless. Permanent housing placement services may be used to help eligible persons establish a new residence where ongoing occupancy is expected to continue. It may be used to complement other forms of HOPWA services. Costs may include placement costs such as application fees, credit checks, reasonable security deposits, things needed to help you secure housing. Deposits should not exceed 2 months' rent, and such funds will be designated to be returned to the program. When it comes to permanent housing placement, this is just your move-in cost, nothing else but just the cost associated with moving someone into a unit. where it says that these costs can be paired with other projects. For example, if you have a family staying in a unit that is way too expensive and is causing them to be unstably housed, PHP funds can be used to relocate them into something more affordable. Or if they're in a housing that may be not good for their health, PHP funds with a reasonable explanation can be used to move them into something more appropriate. Supportive services. Project sponsors must make available appropriate supportive services to eligible individuals or families, either directly or through a referral. Supportive services may be provided either in conjunction with HOPWA housing assistance or as a standalone. What that means is that some agencies can be just a supportive service agency where they provide case management, counseling, or services in that regard. Services and referrals must be documented and tracked in the client's comprehensive housing placement file. Supportive services is mainly where we see the cost for case management drive from. However, we can also pay for other things through supportive services. Supportive services include, but it's not limited to, as I mentioned, case management. It also includes mental health assistance, drug and alcohol treatment, counseling, daycare, personal assistance, food services, intensive care when required, and assistance in gaining access to local, state, and federal government benefits like Social Security or other benefits that may be needed. Resource identification. Activities under this category are specific to: one, identifying housing resources and does not include housing referral services. Two, establishing, coordinating, and/or developing housing assistance resources for eligible persons. So this means coordinating services if need be. Three, hiring staff or consulting to develop housing financial package. Four, conducting primary research. Five, determining feasibility of specific housing-related initiatives. And six, market studies. So the resource identification is mainly for the back work needed to identify housing, to prove there's a need for increased housing inside your community, or to help people locate housing inside rural areas that may not have housing opportunity. Rehab construction. Rehab and new construction is allowable cost under HOPWA, and this is mainly used in rural areas. Agencies must follow the minimum use period regulation and environmental clearance. For additional information on HOPWA regulations, please visit our policies and procedures on our website or HUD Exchange HOPWA program guidance. Any questions regarding the housing opportunity of persons with HIV and AIDS program? Vicki, any questions on the line?
No, there's no questions at this time.
Thank you. Next, we will have Faye McCall to go over the request for cash process.
Okay, here we go again. Next slide. What this is a snapshot of the request for cash, the different sections. If you noticed in section A, the general information, you have a recipient where you can select the drop down. Most of the information in the general, pretty much all of that is going to be populated. Once you select your agency name, it's going to pre-populate your address. It's going to pre-populate the grant number, the contract number. What you will have to complete in this section is the services rendered date. The services rendered date is going to be for the services that you're going to be requesting reimbursement for. If you've provided services from September 15th through the end of the month, then you would put September 15th, 2022 to September 30th, 2023, or through whatever date your services are being rendered. Because when we look at your supporting documentation, we're going to be looking to see that it is within those dates. We would prefer you not putting the contract date in there where it starts December 1 through December of next year. We would prefer for you not to do that. We know it can cover certain areas, but what we would like to know is for you to contain it within a certain period. You will also put in your request for cash number, whether it's request for cash number 1, 2, whatever request for cash number you're on. If I plan to, if it works, I plan to kind of do a demonstration for you as well. Okay, next slide. Section C. Okay, this section, I was thinking, I guess we've done A and B already in the first one. This section, you will not have to really do anything. Everything in this section is pre-populated. Of course, the numbers, the activity numbers that you see over to the right, those are numbers from 2021. We have not done the 2022 yet, but that's forthcoming and it'll be posted on the website. But each grant year, IDIS issues new activity numbers for that particular grant. So don't send me an old RFC with the old activity numbers on it, because those monies will not be available. But pretty much everything in this section is not something that you will have to complete at all. This would be auto-generated either from our end or from your consolidated support sheet. All right, next section. Of course, this section here is basically required accomplishment narrative. That would be awesome if you all would let us know what your accomplishments are for that particular request for cash period. That would be awesome. And then, of course, you see where you get to decide if this is your is this your final request for cash? You would put no. If it is, you would mark yes. We would also like for you to make sure you have your authorized signatory to sign off on your request for cash, and then also type in the name and title of that official. Also, when you do that on this particular page, your date, the prepared by, date prepared, preparer's telephone number, this information will auto-populate to the last page. So you only have to put that in one time, but we will be looking for a signature on the signature line. All right. Okay. Of course, this for MHC officials, that's not something you have to worry about, but it is part of the first tab of the request for cash document. All right. Now, this right here is where you actually do your work. I just kind of did a snapshot of each one of the components. You're up at the top where it's got program, recipient, request for cash number, all of that will be pre-populated from the first tab. When you do your first RFC for shelter, if you requested funding for the shelter, you will go into the amount budgeted and put the amount that you said that you allocated for that. If you allocated $50,000, it will go into the amount budgeted section. That will auto-populate back to tab 1. At that point, and if you have expenses, you will go down under where it has the IDIS and award number. You will go into that section. Say you had some shelter expenses for lights, shelter operation. You will put that information under shelter. Under the CAPA category, it's a drop-down list strictly for shelter. You can only select what's in that under the shelter operations, you will select whatever the expense falls under, whatever category that expense falls under. The vendor is who you're going to be paying. So if you're paying Mississippi Power or Entergy or whoever it is, you would put that's who you're paying. And if there's an invoice number, you can. A lot of times people put like the check number or something like that, and that's okay if you want to put the check number, because that also helps us identify what we're looking for, how we can get to that, to verify that you put that information in. You're going to put your total invoice. If you're splitting this grant between HOPWA and ESG, and you're paying the utilities and you're using 50% for ESG, you're going to still put the total invoice. Say that invoice was $500. You're going to put the total amount of the invoice. However, you're only going to charge 50%, and that'll go in the amount of this request. Okay. That will be how you will do it for each one of the components, for street outreach, for rapid rehousing, homeless prevention, and HMIS. So you just go through each line item. Most of you are familiar with this. There are a few people on here that may not be. I would love to do a one-on-one with you and kind of walk you through the process, but that's how you enter. This is where you enter all your information, all of your expenses, all of the things that you want to be reimbursed for. Well, let me change that. All of the eligible expenses for the program that you will be reimbursed for. So do that, but make sure in order for your amount to populate to the first page, you have to go in under amount budgeted, put that amount in for each component, and then you'll have something to for your expenses to be deducted from. It's going to auto-populate to the amount requested to date, and then, of course, it will give you balances for that. All right, so I think we got that page. All right, next slide. Okay, we have a match section that's very similar to what we just saw. However, it's not a auto-populated thing to the first page, because basically what we're trying to do is get you to share with us on each RFC. You're providing us with the match. Tell us what type of match it is. I think it's a list. I think we also have a CAPER category, because it can be a federal grant, it can be a state, it can be local, it can be, other that doesn't fit into those. But you get to select that from what you have listed, and then you can put who the vendor is, if it's volunteer hours, if there's an invoice or a check number, you can put that. What I have, and then of course, under the match amount, you will put what that total is. It can be a combination. Some people they have donated items. So that they do a page. Of course, their supporting document. They do a page. Their total donated items come to $5,000. They put donated items under the CAPER category, and then the total amount goes into under the match column. Now, when you go to the next, okay, let me just finish this. Let me not get ahead of myself. That will give you the total match for this particular RFC. Your total matches at the bottom, but it will also auto-populate to the bottom where you see cumulative. Cumulative is going to total all of your program expenditures for this for the total RFC. And then, of course, it's going to total for the matching expenditures. However, we want to make sure the match is, for this particular RFC, you want to keep it, if it comes to $20,000 for RFC number one, then that's what the RFC total amount will be. Now, when we move to the next RFC, you want to go up to the little shaded area where it says match at the top. You want to put that, that right there. When you go to your next RFC, you want to put the total from RFC number 1, you want to put that 20,000 up there and then add the new match that you're adding with your second RFC. And then it's going to give you a total at the bottom. So we want to keep up with it. It's kind of similar to the expenses that you're doing in your rapid rehousing and shelter and all of that. But it's doing a little different, but it's just not populating to the front page. All right, we want to make sure that we sign off on it. This is saying that this is an executed document. If you send us a document and it's not signed, then we're going to have to email you and say, hey, this document was not signed. And of course, that we go with the process time. All right, let's see. Okay. The tab for the request for cash, this financial summary, the whole purpose of you selecting those CAPA categories, of course, your information at the top is going to pre-populate over here, who you are, what the contract number is, what the request for cash number is, and the reporting period. So all of that will pre-populate from the RFC tab 1. Your categories have been, it's going to if you have 3 or 4 different of essential services and you selected essential services under the emergency shelter, all of those are going to total in the essential service area. You're going to have a total expenditures for essential services. You'll have total for operations, but you can have multiple items for operations under shelter, but they're going to all total over here on this summary. And it's going to do that for each of the components. So make sure you select the appropriate CAPA category because like earlier in the when we were talking about for homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing, there are different categories for like the rent and the arrears. It falls under rental assistance. And if you notice those little red the little red triangles in the corner over there on the dollar amount, those will tell you what each one of those columns mean, what they're for. Yeah. Those little red tabs is basically a comment or a note telling you what each one of those, what the rental assistance, what that covers, whether it's rent and rental arrears, under the expenditure for housing, relocation, stabilization, and financial services, it tells you what each one of those are going to be. All right, so, but like I said, that's not something you have to do. As long as you do everything right on the consolidated support sheet, which is what we just went over, it's going to pre-populate over here. All right. The same thing is the next slide is just a continuation from the other one. It's with the match. It's going to do the same thing where you have federal, state, local. It's going to pre-populate to this page. Okay, the next tab is our cumulative. And I think we've had a few things, a few issues with this one. And this is one we have to work with pretty good. What we do is if we make a mistake, that's where our little issues come in. But when we do our first RFC, I'm not quite sure, we hit the update cumulative CAPA. Okay, yes. That is going to combine all of by the time we on RFC 10, it's going to be doing a updating from RFC 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. It's going to be updating those categories for us and for you, because at the end of our at the end of the fiscal year, we're going to be sending you an email and asking you to provide us with this information in this format. So, but that's what that little button is for. Sometimes we have to work through that each year. So be patient with us. What we need you to do, though, is the first time you do it and it doesn't work, you need to contact me and Tamara so that we can help you get through that process. Because if you miss one RFC, it's going to affect all of your cumulative totals. Okay. All right. Of course, this page here is basically just a list of all of the categories. When you do your list, when you select from the categories on the consolidated support sheet, this is what you're going to be getting. So under the emergency shelter, you see you have operations, you have case management, you have rent, you have security. All of those will be in the emergency shelter category. So make sure you select the correct category, make sure you understand what it's for, and that way we can provide HUD with the appropriate expenses and under what category they fall under. All right, is that it? Okay. You want me to see if I can try this, go through.
Yes, go ahead and
let me see.
try to share your screen.
Okay. Let me see. See if I can share. All right. Where is mine? All right. Okay, can you all still hear me?
Yes.
All right. What I just went through, I'm going to kind of do a demonstration for you so that you can kind of see what I was talking about. I know some of you all are pros at this, but what I first generally talked about, what you're going to do is go in, you're going to select your agency, and let's say it's Hancock Resource Center. Their address auto-populated, the grant number populated, and the contract. Now what you want to do is go in and put in your service dates. Let's say it was 9/1/2022. See there, I'm messing up already. Apparently,
Using 21. You get to put it in 21. Yeah.
Right. But that's okay. This is part of what we do. Okay. All right. 9/1/21. Let's say 9/30/2021. All right. I should have known this is the 2021 document. All right. Then we gonna put in our request for cash number. Let's say it's 1. That's all we have to do in that section. We don't have to do anything in this section. This is not going to be our final RFC. We're going to select that. Let's say,
1 second, Ms. Bay, it'll be
Okay.
nice if we do get that narrative.
Oh, yeah. Let's not forget to put in a narrative on, hey, Hancock Resource Center is providing services to 25 homeless individuals for this time period. However you want to write it up, I mean, you all know more about what that is than I do, but just accomplishments, things that you've accomplished for this time period would be awesome. And it makes a difference as far as our performance. All right. Thank you for reminding me about that, Tamara. Of course, the next, we got is this your final RFC? We're just going to keep going with it, Ms. Rhonda. Right. Okay, what am I not? Okay, hold on. Roads. Executive Director. President. They say the date is 9. That's 18 and 1. Gonna be prepared by Brian Taylor. 10, 1, 201. Okay, and around them, I don't know your all's phone number, so I'm gonna just put mine in there. 86468. All right, so we've completed this section. We've completed tab 1. We're gonna go to tab 2. You can see that the recipient's name is there, the request for cash number is there, the contract number is there. So we're gonna scroll up to shelter. Let's say Rhonda and them got $5,000 in shelter. They housed client with hotel motel. We're gonna select that hotel motel voucher. We put 8. Total invoice. $400. And they're gonna request $400. Okay. You notice it got the $5,000 budgeted amount, and this is what you'll do for each component. To go back and let me show you on tab 1. When I put the amount and the budget amount on the consolidated support sheet, it auto-populated over here to, it also put in the request for cash, the requested amount, and of course it gave us the balance. Of course, all of the formulas are set up where it's pre-populated to that area. So you would do that in each area of shelter, street outreach, rapid rehousing, homeless prevention, and the HMIS. For match, if I have a match, okay, we do have a match category where we'll say that she matched that with other federal funds. I don't know who. This is the, I don't know. No invoice number, and we'll just put in 400. So what we did was we put in that it was matched with SSBF funds, and the amount was $400. Of course, at the bottom, it gives you the grand total for your match. It also gives you the grand total for your invoice, and the amount that was requested, the amounts that was matched. This is how much you had budgeted. Of course, your amount requested today is the same. And of course, your balance is $4,600. You notice down here in the cumulative, your program expenditures was $400, your total match is $400, and the total expenditures with your match is $800. At the bottom, you also see where the name of the executive director and title was pre-populated. The date, I guess I got that messed up. And then, of course, Brian Taylor, who prepared it, and the phone number. So that's how you enter your information on the consolidated support sheet. On the CAPER.
One thing,
Okay.
Faye, go back to the consolidated report sheet, please.
Okay.
This is where most requests for cash tends to get kicked back because of incorrect typos. That request to date, you have to put in how much you requested to date, add it up yourself. It's not going to pre-add it, and then type it up there correctly so it can actually add to your request for cash page.
What's that? I'm sorry.
The request to cash to date, requested to date. Yes,
okay.
to the very top.
This right here.
Yes.
She got me again.
Say that again tomorrow.
I was saying that you have to type in, when you're on RFC number 2, you need to type in your request to date.
Right.
What you did from RFC number 1, and on RFC number 3, you need to add them all together correctly and then type it in there again.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So say we're finished with RFC number 1. Okay. You're going to save this document as RFC number 1. But you can also use RFC number 1 and then just save it as RFC number 2. All of your information is in there. But when you go back in, let me just for the heck of it, let's just save this. Okay. Okay. No, I don't want to replace it. Let me find somewhere to go. Let me just put it on my desktop. All right. Okay. Now, this is RFC number 1. However, we've already paid RFC number 1. You done got your $4,000. Now, you go back into your RFC number 1. We got the same organization. What we're going to do now is save this as let's see, RFC number 2. Now, okay, this is RFC number 2. And we're going to go in and just update the RFC. We're going to put the one and 31. 1031. 21. Okay. So we've pretty much done everything. We'll go in and make the changes here. Make that 10. Make that 11. 1 to go to 1. 11, 1 to go to 1. Okay. Got the same information. All you're doing is updating the dates, updated the RFC number. You're going to go to here and you're going to take this out. You're also going to put in 4,600 here. That way, when you enter your new let's say case management, invoice, you put whoever it is you're paying the case management to, may put the check number or whatever there. Your total invoice is $1,000. You're going to pay them $1,000. And of course, now we have updated it to number 2. But the most important thing, when you move to your next RFC from 1 to 2 to 3 or whichever one it is, always go in and make sure your beginning amount requested to date is the same as the previous ending amount to date from the last RFC. Okay? Make sure it's the same. Oh, that should have been 400. Gotcha. Okay. All right. So this way, always look at the last RFC, the balance for each one of your components on your previous RFC should be the beginning balance on your current RFC. All right. probably gonna have some questions on this, but this is how it works. And so we just keep, from each RFC, we just keep doing that. Your, now that your operation had $1,000, oh, I didn't put anything in my, let me put this at 400. This time it's $1,000. Okay. Now that we have that, you're on your CAPER, you're gonna have a new federal amount of $1,000. Now let's see if this thing is going to work for the CAPER 21. Ooh, here we go. Let's see. I don't know if I did it on the other one, y'all. Okay, it did it for that one, but I didn't do it on RC number 1. So, and that's the mistake that we make a lot of times. So we have to go back and hit the CAPER cumulative, the updated CAPER cumulative for the first one, because then it would have had the $400 on there. But you all get the picture, right? All right.
Thank you,
All
Ms.
right.
Fay. I'll go
All
ahead
right.
and share my screen again.
Okay. Whew, y'all don't work me today.
So there has been some changes in the way we will be accepting your request for cash forms. We traditionally accept emails directly to Ms. Fay, to Vicky, to myself, or different staff members have come and gone. And honestly, we tend to get a lot of emails. So human nature, sometimes the RSC is at the bottom of the email list and not at the top. So we have created specific an RSC email address. This is where your request for cash needs to go starting with this new grant year. We will be emailing you this email address when we send you your 2022 RSC form. But that's the email address, one for HOPWA, one for ESG. This is not where you go to communicate with me or Ms. Fay or Vicky. If you need to communicate with us, email us directly. This is where you go to submit your request for cash forms. If you've been submitting your request for cash forms in HMIS, please submit your form, not the client's name, in this email address, and then we will know to go to HMIS to put a documentation. Unfortunately, we don't go in HMIS every single day. It's not our primary form of communication. So if you can send us an email through the RSC email address, notifying us that we have an RSC at HMIS, if that's your way of communicating, that will definitely help us with this process. Please write this down. Once again, for 2022 program year, we will not be accepting our RSCs directly to the staff person. Staff people tend to stay, tend to leave, tend to change positions, and things sometimes get lost in the weeds. It's same thing from your agency. You might have a new staff member that's setting the RSC, and I don't know their name, so their email might not pop out at me. So if you send it to this email address, we know all of the emails going to this address are requests for cash that are ready to be reviewed and processed. This year, we're also going to be pushing hard to get match documentation when you submit your request for cash. If you have a grant that you're using as match that you submitted with your application or at the beginning of the project here, that's totally fine. Other than that, we will be looking for you to provide your match at the time or around that period that services are rendered. Especially when you're coming down to the end of the project year, if you're behind and you need to catch up, we understand a couple, maybe 1 or 2 months being behind, but it shouldn't be so far behind. Just like you go through an audit and the monitoring, we also go through that process, and we are required to provide your information that we receive. Finally, most of you are already doing this, but if you have not, these grants are reimbursement, which means it's on our checklist. We need evidence that services have been paid, not that it's about to be paid potentially, but evidence that services have been paid. That's a regulation requirement, not an MHC requirement. We have to have evidence, verification that service has been paid and paid in a good, reasonable time. Any questions regarding the way we will be accepting requests from cash for this program year? As I mentioned, when you get your request for cash form, the email address will be connected to that packet that you received from us. The planning process. Most of y'all are not familiar with AAP and the COM plan, but we have David Hancock, VP of the Executive Division, on the line with us to talk about our AAP and COM plan and how significant they are with the ESG and HOPWA programs. David?
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this important event. My name is David Hancock. I'm the Vice President of the Executive Division here at the Mississippi Home Corporation, and I assist Tamara and her team with HUD's reporting requirements. I was invited today to let you know how we administer the Citizen Participation Plan as it relates to the 5-year consolidated plan and our annual action plan. We develop both of these in accordance with an approved citizen participation plan from HUD. And as part of this process, we are, as the state of Mississippi's lead agency, we must consult with a wide variety of organizations in order to gain understanding of the housing and community development needs across the state. This represents a collective effort from a broad array of entities in Mississippi, ranging from advocacy groups for the disabled to economic development organizations. Sorry about that. These groups include private, nonprofit, and public organizations, including all of the state's public and regional housing authorities, non-entitlement communities, county governments, continuum of care organizations, and state agencies. MHC seeks input on specific evidence-based program modifications or new initiatives that can enable the state to better meet the needs of citizens. These organizations are contacted through internet surveys, email correspondence, conference calls, webinars, public hearings, group meetings, workshops, site visits, face-to-face interactions, and a statewide conference. The advisory groups are solicited to discuss housing and community development needs across the state, including ranking those needs and activities that MHC might consider in better addressing needs throughout the state. Further, individuals are asked to provide additional insight into prospective barriers and constraints to addressing housing and community development needs in Mississippi. Typically, public involvement begins in February of each planning year and extends over a period of 3 to 4 months. The key steps taken include updates to the advisory group list, a schedule of public hearing dates, locations, and times, public announcements, public hearings, and a 30-day public comment period. During the consolidated planning process, a survey is designed to draw information from affordable housing advocates and community members alike about a variety of housing and community development needs across the state. The surveys are made available online in multiple languages, and MHC hosts these public hearings across the state, and we are able to host them in any town. Public comments are recorded and transcribed at all public hearings and included in both the annual action plan and the consolidated plan. Written comments received during the 30-day public comment period are responded to by MHC and MDA and included in the official document submitted to HUD for approval. The state's 5-year consolidated plan presents the overriding strategies and goals of Mississippi's plan for housing and community development including selected performance criteria associated with each strategy and goal. Furthermore, there may be a need to direct such housing resources by use of project selection criteria, which may be updated annually based upon year-to-year need and local circumstances. All public hearings are open to the public and held at accessible venues for persons with disabilities. MAC will also accommodate persons with hearing impairments and those in need of translators. MAC's Citizen Participation Plan states that the state of Mississippi will publish notices regarding the schedule of public hearings for the consolidated plan and the annual action plan through statewide and regional newspapers of general circulation in the legal or non-legal section of a newspaper of general circulation. The Mississippi Home Corporation will make a translator available at all public hearings based upon individual request or where a significant number of non-English speaking persons or interest groups notify MAC's Planning and Research Department at least 3 business days prior to the public hearing and request appropriate translation services. MHC and ESG staff work closely with COCs to administer the ESG program. MAC staff work with COCs to allocate resources equitably across COC boundaries and have ongoing discussions around how to update and improve the allocation formula. MAC also has routine meetings with Mississippi's HMIS provider regarding funding, policies, and administration. MAC will continue to engage coordination with the continuums of care to improve targeted resources to help those most in need of services to prevent homelessness. Where there are existing programs and services for homeless individuals and homeless families, expansion of these programs will improve, integrate, and maximize each community's strength and mainstream services targeted to those populations. By working together, better alignment and coordination of community development programs with a range of other programs and resources can help to achieve greater impact. The citizen participation planning process serves as the framework for a community-wide dialogue to identify housing and community development priorities that align and focus funding where it is most needed in our state. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That was great. So this is where y'all come in a different way to make impact. If you see a need, if you have suggestions, if you would like to see the funds used a certain way, you want to see policy change, you help to actually participate in our citizen participation plan process. Provide written comments in the appropriate time period, and also in regards to our advisory meetings. We are required to go through this process, but when it's completed, it's completed. For example, this year in our comp plan and in our AAP, we decided that along ESG regulations, agencies will be responsible for making and implementing their policies as they see fit. So we rely on you to follow the federal regulations, our regulations, and to develop your own policy. We also rely on you to provide more input and more guidance. You are the feet on the ground, you're in the community. So if you want to see something change, you have to participate in this process. AAP is every year. Comp plan is every 5 years. You missed the comp plan, you gotta wait 5 more years to get into that process. So please, when you see those emails come in, participate and don't just attend. If you have comments, make those comments. It doesn't make sense complaining later if you didn't provide a comment, but we can actually make change happen. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
All right, so going into ESG updates, some more things for us to talk about. Performance measures taken from 24 CFR 576-400. This year, we will be looking at performance measures. It's a requirement for ESG agencies or funders to work with the COC to develop performance measures During our AAP, the COC agreed that we should implement performance measures in line with the COC performance measures, which includes these 3 steps: homeless, housing, and income. We're looking more so at discharges into homelessness, returns to homelessness over time, housing, housed within 30 days of program entry. This is actually also an ESG regulation. Once they're in ESG program, they have to be housed within 30 days. Income, we're looking to see some increases of income at program exit. I know it's hard when it comes to the income, especially working with some of these at-risk or high-risk populations, to get some income generated, but this doesn't always have to be earned income. If you are able to get people connected to disability or other supports, that's also counted towards income. HUD updates. As I mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, HUD don't change their rules often. They rarely change the rules, but sometimes they do, and we have to adjust accordingly. Before we get into the rules, let's look at the contracts. If you have your contract, it's because you either did the 2 things we asked you to do. 1, we have your approved environmental clearance. 2, we have a budget that was submitted to us so we can know how to allocate your funds. If you don't have your contract, I'm guaranteeing it's because you didn't do one of the 2 or you didn't do both. So please make sure you get those things to us so you can get your contract. The contract date is December 8th, 2022 to December 7th, 2023. Yes, it's different than what you see every year. However, we have to go according to what the contract date is from HUD, and that's the contract date, 12/8/22 to 12/7/23. We are allowed this time, thanks to the HUD notice CPD 2205, to actually reimburse, and that it should not be there, reimburse costs incurred before the project budget time. So if you have costs that you incurred from September, which I'm sure most of y'all do, from September to December, it's allowed. Even though the contract date says 12/8/22, you can actually, on your first RFC, you need to put that cost that you incurred from September to December. You can find this waiver in your contract under section ESG section 3D or in HOPWA section contract section 4B. Once again, we don't want to have to be paying back for activities that you completed way months from now, in 3 months from now. So let your first RFC be a catch-up RFC and put as much of the cost that you can that you incurred from September to December on that first RFC, and then we can move forward. But please don't be afraid. If you see your contract and you see December 8th, not to fail, you'll see that notice in your contract where we are allowing agencies to capture costs incurred before the contract period, which is allowed by HUD. All right, new to the policy, ESG, Violence Against Women Act requirements. ESG always required for us to have language in our policy. You might say us, that means Mississippi Home Corporation and subrecipients should have language in their policy to protect against or to protect people who are going through domestic violence situations. But to add to that, HUD is also requiring documentation to ensure all VAWA protections are included in your rental assistance agreement. So we will have a new rental assistance agreement this year, which will include the VAWA language on there. So don't use the rental assistance agreements from last year because they won't have it in there and you will be out of compliance. Update your policies. If you do not have VAWA in your policy, include it in your policy. And then you also must make sure that clients are signing off on the notice of rights and certification form for VAWA. There is a form. I'll send it to you. If you do not have it already, Every person must have this in their file. HUD says all participants receiving rental assistance, whether you know that they have DV situations going on or not, the form must be in their file. However, only those who are DV survivors need to fill it out. The thing is, they must have the option to fill it out in case something happens. Today, they might not be a DV survivor. Tomorrow they are. So they need to have access to that form. And that form allows them to transfer out of a place or move somewhere safe if something happened, and you cannot require them to stay in a dangerous situation. Any questions about the VAWA requirements? We will have more detailed presentation and training on this, especially for the non-DV agencies who this is the first time you're hearing this. We will definitely have more information provided to you. But so you can be prepared, this is what HUD is requiring. We have to have a plan of action for those who may suffer from domestic violence later. They might not come to you as a domestic violence survivor, but it might happen later, and they need to have the availability and flexibility to relocate without punishment. And this form will guarantee that that can happen. Any questions? Vicki? Okay, thank you.
No, there's none. Ms. Fay has answered some of them. There is a few, I take that back. There is a few from the earlier slides, unless you want to wait.
Yeah, I want to wait for those, regarding policy dates and VAWA requirements.
I don't have any for that, no.
Okay. The other policy change is for the HOPWA program as of December 27, 2022. All HOPWA programs, STIRMU, TBRA, facility-based. If it has HOPWA doors attached to it and it's a building, you're required to have the carbon monoxide alarm process in place, whereas every dwelling has a carbon monoxide alarm if they have a garage attached or if they have gas type of machinery in their home. Please stay tuned for more training on that, but this is no exception when it comes to HOPWA. So if you have clients that have been in program before December 27, 2022, those students need to come in compliance. We also need to make sure you're following your local fire code regulations when it comes to carbon monoxide. Now, this is a requirement for HOPWA programs and also for Section 8 programs. It's not a requirement for ESG as yet. We will see what HUD decides to do with ESG, I'm sure, by next year. HOPWA CAPER. It was a year for HOPWA. Everything changed for HOPWA this year. So as of the first of the year, Mississippi Home Corporation is not responsible for doing the nitty-gritty with the CAPER, and I'm excited by I do know how tedious it is, so I do know our subrecipients would need help with that process. But as of January 1st, project sponsors are now responsible for completing their own CAPER. So you will complete your CAPER, and then you will submit it to MHC, where we will combine them as one big CAPER and submit that to HUD. The good thing is Cloudburst is on the call to help, and they are a TA agency, and they are very good at what they do. So expect very soon to be getting contact from Cloudburst once we give them your contact information, and also a new CAPER package for HOPWA. It will not look like the one we've used years past. It's going to be an Excel document, which is great, and it'll be something that you will have to complete. And now that also means that if there's errors on the CAPERs or issues they find with the CAPERs, they won't be contacting Mississippi Home Corporation. They will be contacting you directly to make the updates and adjustments as needed. ESG CAPERs will continually be developed by Mississippi Home Corporation. With the ESG CAPERs, though, we will be providing you a form this time at the beginning of July, because we do know sometimes it's difficult compiling two different CAPER years to make one CAPER. So we are working on ways to improve that process for ESG. funding opportunities. When I sent a notice of funding to everybody, I did mention that we are excited that this is the first year that I'm aware of that we have 23 ESG and HOPWA agencies funded, which is great news. We wanted to increase funded agencies, and we did that this year. However, I also know that that meant that some of the agencies were used to getting a certain amount of funds, got less than what they predicted. We are trying to make funds available. We will be accepting requests up until 2/3, if appropriately documented. From 1:30 to 2/3, we'll accept requests. Some people have reached out to me, so I'll send you the form for documentation so you can complete that. If you have ESG CV funds, I'm going to let you know right now, most likely you won't be considered, but it all depends. All right, that's all the information I have for you today. This was a broad overview. Our programs require more information, more in-depth training, and we will be providing you training throughout the year, especially to our agencies that are brand new, to our agencies that are transferring from CV to ESG for the first time, and to our agencies that will be implementing the new policies from HUD, who may need some assistance with their policy updates and processes. So you will see more content coming up from us. You might also see us showing up at your agency to help provide on-site training. Look forward to meeting with you all throughout the year. If you have any questions that was not addressed before, feel free to send to Vicki and we will address it at this time. Vicki?
Yes, ma'am. There are a few. There's one from Sean Sullivan. He is stating that they won't have match on their RFC when they submit it for September and October due to match beginning on December the 8th. Is that correct? You want to know, is that correct?
No, every dollar requires a match. So if you spent money back in September, you want to recapture that cost, match must be included with that.
Okay. There was also a question regarding the availability of the slides. Will they be able to print? Will they be available to print?
The slides along with the video will be available on our website, God willing, by next week. But I probably could definitely send the slides more quickly than if you all need that immediately, whilst we process everything to be posted on our website.
Are they available to be printed?
Yes, it is 85 slides. If you would like to print it, feel free.
All right, there is a new message coming in. So from Rhonda Reed at Gulf Coast. So that means I can include volunteer hours and other grant information from September, October, November, and match on the first RFC.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct.
That's correct. Faye, am I correct?
Yes.
I would say that's correct.
Yes.
Okay. And I do believe that was all of the questions that were not answered. Okay, hold on, there's a new message. From Amy, additional funding requests emailed tomorrow for the application forms. Is that correct?
I already got Amy email, so we will start accepting those on the 30th. So once the form is ready for you, Amy, I will send it to you.
Okay. And I do believe that, oh no, just a minute. Oh, she just said thank you. Okay. Now believe that's it for the questions tomorrow.
Wonderful. We were able to end 10 minutes early. Thank you all so much for your participation. I can't stress enough how important it is to participate in the citizen participant plan, to help with the AAP and the COM plan. And one more thing I do want to mention, when it comes to our regulations, this is where it comes from. It has to be in our COM plan. My performance measures that I've listed today, that was a part of our COM plan. That's what MAC is looking at, and that's what HUD is looking at. We have to, if you want to make changes, if you have suggestions, if you saw a best practice you would like to recommend, you have to participate in the COM plan citizen participation process. Send us an email in writing during that time period so it can be added. Our process is up. really determined. Once we come to y'all with the funds, and once we come to y'all to do these policy trainings, a year ago, 5 years ago, HUD already approved our plan, our comp plan every 5 years, our AAP, our annual action plan every year. So we'll have to look at that for the next plan in regards to how these changes can best fit our overall goal. All right, y'all. Thank you all so much, and I look forward to working with everybody. Have a wonderful, blessed day.
Just a minute tomorrow. I'm sorry,
Oh.
there's more coming in. From Dina Waldo, she wants to know, can they submit all the match funds at once for the total grant?
If you want to start off your program here, providing all of your match, yes. We just don't want to get in predicament where HUD or someone comes looking for the match and we don't have it yet because you're waiting to the end of the year. That is what we don't want. So beforehand is great. During is also great. Afterwards, when the grant is closed out, it's not acceptable.
Okay. And now I do believe that's all of the questions that were presented in this session. That's it.
Thank you all so much. And as I said, we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Tomorrow.
Yes.
David put in the chat, just FYI, MHC is currently determining dates and locations for public hearings, so be on the lookout for that. And also Hannah put in the chat, hello, if you need to connect to the Mississippi Balance of States COC Coordinated Entry System and HMIS, please feel free to reach out to Hannah.
Thank you. Thank you. And then I didn't put that contact information on there. Shame on me. Please, regardless of what COC, Balance of State, Hannah put a contact in there. Central COC, please reach out to them. If you don't know who your COC agency is, please let us know. On the coast, we have Open Doors, Homeless Service Coordination. Also, we have some agencies who've been doing this program, HOPWA and ESG, for years. They are really good at what they do. If you're new and you don't know which way to go and you probably need some advice, it's nothing wrong with reaching out to your peers, someone in your community who's been doing it a while. Just let us know. We'll be happy to make those connections for you.
Also, Tamara, would this recording be available on our website, the MHC website?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Faye just answered it. She just did answer it. Okay.
All right. Thanks again. You'll have a blessed, wonderful afternoon and weekend.
Thank you.